This is Dr. Rosie Kuhn, and this podcast series is called Spiritual Immersion, Taking the Plunge. I may stutter a little bit because I'm starting a new podcast, this podcast, after I was doing another podcast called Aging Like a Guru. So I start wanting to speak Aging Like a Guru when it's now Spiritual Immersion, Taking the Plunge. So today what I want to do is share with you a little bit of my story and what gives me the inspiration to do these podcasts and perhaps write blogs and hopefully a book that comes out of this as well. In terms of the process of a spiritual immersion process and some of the things that show up for people as they go through this. So for me, I am almost 68 years old, and I would say the first spiritual immersion process I started when I was like 17. I won't talk so much about that, but at that age, I had no support. At that age, there was no therapists to talk to or spiritual guides. There was only me, basically, and my parents wouldn't understand something like that. They were Catholic, and their level of consciousness and awareness, they didn't necessarily, as far as I knew, could understand or accept or support me through that process. So I was pretty isolated through that process, and I think that's kind of normal for a lot of people. I was suicidal, and again, had no way of handling that. But over a couple of years, it transitioned as I focused on things like going to college and other boyfriends and things like that. That kind of distracted me. The next time something like that showed up was when I was in my 30s, and I had just broken up with a boyfriend. And because I hadn't dealt with a divorce and separation from my children and other things, when that separation happened from that boyfriend, it just really took me down. And it lasted for about a year, in probably 4 months of intensity, and then it started to soften. And so within the year, I was kind of back to myself. But in that process, I was in a lot of physical pain and anguish, and cried a lot, and didn't have any understanding or support around that, other than it seemed to be a very deep grief process. And so that's how I handled it. And then the third one is that has started about 10 years ago. It was actually, it started before that, but in a sense that I started to have anguish a lot, and anxiety and energy that didn't have a place to go. And so I felt like I wanted to move and jitter and juggle all the time. Sometimes I coughed a lot and spewed, or felt like I was retching, though there wasn't anything I was throwing up. It was like an energetic vomiting. And because I had been exposed to breath work and other medicines and healing practices, I was comfortable with the fact that, this is my body telling me it's letting go of energies and things that it doesn't need anymore. So though it didn't show up as emotional or a thought process, I knew that energetically this was happening. And so I gave it room for that. And then that transitioned into when I was about 58, when I got a calling, in a sense, a spiritual calling and inspiration to quit the work I was doing. I was facilitating a coaching training program in the Silicon Valley at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. And I'd been doing that for almost 10 years, and it was wonderful, and it was successful, and I had a lot of clients, and I was really happy with that work. But I was called to something else that I didn't know. I just knew that it would be very exciting and prosperous, and in a sense, it felt like I was going to get famous from it. And not from an illusional place. I was doing a lot of good work, so it was possible that that was going to happen. So I stopped the training program. I'd already been living on Orcas Island for about 8 years, so the idea was I would do my work primarily from here until I got called to wherever and whatever. And so I quit, and the day that I finished all of that and was home, I was ready for the phone to ring, and it didn't ring. And nobody called, and nothing happened. And so the bottom line is that my clients disappeared, and the financial stability disappeared, and I was in a panic because nothing was showing up. And it's like, wait, what's happening? I know I was called, and I've had a number of callings before. And if you want to know more about that, my book, the Unholy Path, The Unholy Path of a Reluctant Adventurer, is a book I wrote that talks about the many callings I've had and how I followed those and those kinds of things. So I was familiar with the process of having a calling and following through, which included crossing the Atlantic Ocean. So I was waiting because I knew that this was what was happening. But in that process, I had to begin to look at things differently. And I had to begin to turn my faith towards my higher power, my higher knowing, my highest truth, and begin to train myself to make choices from that place, as opposed to make choices from consensus view of reality, like go get a job, go do this, go do that, be busy, do this and do that. And I knew it was time to turn myself in towards something else. And for me, that was the beginning of my spiritual immersion process. Now, important thing here is that I'm calling it a spiritual immersion process versus a spiritual emergence process. And the reason I make that distinction, you can find books on spiritual immersion or emergence. And I think the idea of spiritual immersion is a little bit newer. For me, a spiritual emergence process, there is more of an emergency to it quite often. And there's more of a challenging indicators that are showing up. Kundalini, or again, the body is doing things or feeling things or sensing things, or there may be a spiritual presence, or a sense of possession, or something that's, for me, this is my work in terms of my understanding, and is something is happening in the body that is greater than. And so it needs attention, and it needs attention in a way that will take you again into a spiritual immersion process. But the symptoms, if you will, or the indicators are saying something needs my attention right away. And if it's an emergency, a spiritual emergency, then your attention is needed like immediately, and you need the support of either people who know how to be with spiritual emergencies, or you're probably going to be want to go into a medical facility where you can get some support that way. So there's all kinds of ways, but I don't want to focus on that so much, but just to say there are spiritual emergences that happen, emerging, like you're emerging like a flower, or there's emergencies where things are happening quickly and you need the attention that you can get. And quite often that usually happens in terms of a medical facility. For me, I was gifted, I felt like, because it was a gift to experience, to take the steps myself, to say, okay, I have to train myself to be with this in a way that is going to help and support me, not avoid and ignore this anymore, because it was unignorable. What was happening financially, what was happening in my relationship with my husband, what was happening with my work, it was not ignorable. So I had to pay attention, and in that I began to take the steps to self-discovery in relation to my spirit self. So I started to dance with God, if you will. I started to learn how to dance with God, how to learn to dance with myself as God, to learn to dance with myself as this divine oneness that I said I was and said everybody is, but didn't actually walk the talk. So that process then has evolved over the years into just an exquisite relationship that I have with the divine universe. And in that, it wasn't as if I was laying on the couch all day doing nothing. I was very creative. I was very active. I had to be outside. I live in a very natural environment, so I had to be outside a couple of hours a day at least. I had to walk. I had clients. I did a lot of writing. I think I've written like 11 books in that time period. Went to Russia and did some retreats. So it's not as though I was doing nothing and life sucked. Life was very, and continues to be very creative and inspiring. And these challenges kept coming up. Not kept coming up, they were part of my life to continue to press into what I needed to know for myself, what I needed to change my beliefs about, what I needed to focus on, what I needed to train myself to do. In terms of rather than focusing on fear-based reality, I began to train myself to focus on the highest truth, the highest knowing, what my essential nature was, as opposed to what I should be doing. So those are, I'm wanting to give you a piece of, here's potentially what this looks like, and here's what it looked like and experienced for me. And everyone will have their own unique experience. So what I found most valuable for me to go through this discovery process was to use specific books that were my teachers. So Course in Miracles was really helpful. A book called Oneness. It's by a woman named Rasha, Rasha. Highly recommend that book. Journaling every day, because that was a way that I could really connect with myself. David Hawkins' work, no, that's not it. David Hawkins' book, Levels of Consciousness. Anyway, we'll talk about that more. But David Hawkins' work has been and continues to be very, very helpful in looking at and distinguishing what's happening and where and why. That was really, really helpful. So I think that's it for today. I just want to give you a little heads up. Prior to all of this, or as I was going through all of this, I've been a marriage and family therapist. I've worked in recovery for years. I worked in Nova Scotia in the recovery center, and use the recovery model with just about every single person, whether it's a spiritual immersion process or whatever their life issues are. Quite often there's a recovery addictive patterning that needs to shift. And in terms of cultivating this process of spiritual immersion, that there are addictive patterns that need to be looked at and discovered and chosen, if you will, to say, oh, that doesn't work for me anymore. I got to give that one up. And how long it takes in the sense of detoxing from our cellular memory from traumas or emotions or patternings that have been with us. Probably they come through quite often from our ancestors, but sometimes through our own past life experiences or parallel life experiences. All kinds of things show up in this process of spiritual immersion. So my intention with these podcasts on spiritual immersion, taking the plunge, is to support and empower you to be with yourself with a lot of compassion and kindness, to know yourself through this process and know that you're not alone, and to know that there are sources out there and supports that that are available to you all the time. It doesn't make the process easier. It just makes it more comfortable to know you're not alone. And it still will feel like you're alone, and you're not, but it will feel that way. But you're not. So that's a part of my job here. All right. Blessings to you. If you have any questions or ideas or thoughts that you'd like me to talk about, please leave a comment here, or you can email me at rosie@theparadigmshifts.com. All right. Blessings to you. Bye for now.